Hi everyone, my name is Carlos Pardo and I'm here with you for this webinar on tactical urbanism as a COVID-19 response. I'm the moderator, but we'll have very interesting people as panelists today. And we're going to have Mike Lydon, who's going to be talking to us about tactical urbanism plus the potential for use during COVID-19. And we'll have Laura Bahamon, who's going to be presenting the Bogota case, which is related to temporary bikeways and other measures around COVID. The guy in the picture is me, and you can see my Twitter handle there in case you are, as me, sometimes addicted to Twitter and would like to start tweeting already. We're going to take 20 minutes for Mike's presentation. Then we'll have 20 more minutes for Laura's presentation. And after, we'll have a chance to go through questions and answers. But in any event, you can all use the chat function of GoToMeeting so that you can write your questions there. And I'll be happy to start compiling them so that we can have a few of them already when we begin talking. So Mike is working with street plans. Many people already know Mike from his work around tactical urbanism, and it's great to have him there. And Laura, of course, is the bicycle manager of Bogota. Just recently inaugurated position for her because we began a new government, and we're very happy to have both of you here. I'm going to start by giving Mike the floor, and I'm going to give him the chance to start the presentation. There's a lot of people, so now I have to find him in this. So Mike, it's now your turn to speak. Please go ahead.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Let me just pull this up. I hope you are all happy and well, or as happy as possible at a time like this. I'm going to start by doing a quick introduction to tactical urbanism. Some of you may be very familiar with that, but just to set the groundwork here for what has emerged most recently with our current crisis. I am based in Brooklyn, New York. We are obviously in the very middle of this horrible crisis that's facing our city. And it's a very weird time for me. It's a very weird time for our city. It's very challenging. And so for all of us who are mostly, staying at home, it is really helpful to be able to connect with people digitally. So I feel very grateful for being here with you now. Street Plans is a consulting firm. We also do a lot of research and advocacy in our work. We're based in Miami and New York City. We're a company that's now 10 years old, and we focus primarily on the public realm in terms of transportation and public space, but our methods are tactical urbanism, and placemaking is really what underpins all of our work at Street Plans. Tactical urbanism, as we have defined it, is an approach to community building that uses short-term, low-cost, and scalable projects that are intended to catalyze long-term change. And we've thought really carefully about this definition, and we underscore the word intent, because a project can be low cost, it can be short term, but is it actually intended to create and move toward that long-term change? That's how we really separate projects that are tactical or not. So many of our cities, for many decades, have really largely focused on permanent infrastructure and long-term outcomes. And the planning field and the design field is largely oriented towards those outcomes. And that is very challenging for cities, particularly for politicians who have much shorter timelines to show progress, right? And communities who are demanding change happen faster. So tactical urbanism really fills the gaps. And so I won't go through this in great detail, but we really look at 3 different phases or intervals of projects. And each one of these has different materials, has different engagement mechanisms, has different outcomes, has different implications for maintenance, promotion, programming, all these things. And so we really look to the demonstration projects as the very first step, but those projects are certainly not nearly as robust or long-lasting as, say, pilot projects or interim design. This type of iterative approach is something that we all, I think, intuitively understand now in the 21st century. You know, you think about as you see on the screen, Windows 3 and how far as a software that has come. We didn't just jump right to Windows 10, right? It started with iterations. Every year or so, a new version comes out. And I think that as a culture, we've gotten used to things being improved in increments and iteratively, and we expect it, right? And we believe very strongly that this has permeated into city building as well. And so this idea of testing out projects and then learning from them, you know, collecting a lot of data, learning from the impact, both good and bad, and then reinvesting in the things that work is really the kind of the heart of the methodology. And for anyone who is familiar with the book, The Lean Startup, this is really an adaptation of that whole idea on how you start with prototypes and test out your ideas and move forward. You know, so much of our built environment is focused on just design, and that, you know, as experts, as architects, as planners, designers, you know, we know how to design any given environment. But what we often see is that people use space very differently. So what tactical urbanism allows us to do is really study and learn from the user experience and then invest in design around how people want to use or are already using urban space. To go back to that 3-interval chart, you know, really looking at public engagement, that's what demonstration projects are all about. It's a tool and a platform for engaging people in city making. So it's a way to put something out into the public realm, into the street, and get people's reaction to it, both good and bad. These are the most lowest cost and the fastest projects, often just a few $100s worth of materials. But really what we look at more and more is how do you fill the gap between a capital long-term project and a successful public engagement. And that's really where, or a plan, and that's where pilot projects and interim design comes into play. So pilot projects are a way to really test those ideas over many months, if not years. And then interim design is what happens when you have a successful pilot or elements of the pilot that are successful, but you still need to fill the gap between the pilot project and the long-term, say, reconstruction of a public space. So interim design has much stronger implications around material durability and maintenance practices. And of course, policies is something that, and programs are something that we are developing more and more with cities so they can embed this work in how they do their city building. So it's a process that allows for both top-down and bottom-up and everything in between. You know, you can be a citizen activist, you can be a mayor or a city councilor, and there is ways for you to have a very important role in tactical urbanism and building your city. So again, in terms of the values, we look at the values of the long-term large-scale projects. You can see here, this is the highway being built right through the edge of downtown Miami many years ago. Projects that are overly focused on large scale, they're very slow and expensive. They lack transparency, which oftentimes breeds public mistrust. And once you've gone so far down a multi-million-dollar project, the design becomes pretty static and inflexible. Whereas tactical urbanism is obsessed with the small scale. Let's do something on the street corner, on the vacant lot, on the block, and start there to work towards long-term big investments. So it's very quick and inexpensive. It's 100% transparent. If you as a city, as you as citizens are out in your street doing something, that is the most public way to do design and to collect feedback on a project. And of course, it's flexible. If it doesn't work, you can remove the paint, it washes away, etc. The benefits are that when these projects, people work together in new ways. You think about like experience retail being a very strong buzzword. This really creates a city as experience, and that we're all contributing to it in some way. The benefits also are that you can uncover what works, but most importantly, what doesn't. So you don't invest in things and go down that path for things that don't work, either politically or from an urban design perspective. And finally, the big benefit is it builds political will. When you show success, people get behind that much faster, and we can deliver the mid and long-term benefits faster as well, as people start to buy into these ideas and believe in a different city. And finally, as a quick takeaway, This is a very short example of a project we worked on with Happy City. So if you know Charles Montgomery's work in West Palm Beach, and we were studying the way that people reacted to the waterfront promenade, which is the top image there. And we made a very quick change, adding a lot of more human elements to what was already a pretty beautiful space, but it made it much more usable. And we found a lot of very positive results, including a significant reduction in stress, increase in perceived restoration and social well. That stationary activity and connect, and that is what brings more trust and well-being to our public space and our public realm. So we do this work, we do it very publicly because, you know, if you just listen to me speak here on this webinar, you might remember 10% of what I say. Or, you know, sorry, if you were to read our book, I should say, you remember 10% of what you read that day. You remember about 20% of what you hear, but 90% of what you do or simulate. So this is, you know, tactical urbanism is all about the doing, the simulating change, and getting people to actually viscerally understand what's possible in the neighborhood where they live or work, right? And that helps breed what we call place attachment, right? In the placemaking world, this breeds pride and trust and excitement for the city and the future of the city. So I'll leave you here with just 5 lessons, including one shorter, quick case study. You know, we look at, you know, not necessarily creating new plans in cities. That might be a little bit blasphemous to say as a planning consultant, but there's so many good plans that have already been written or good ideas and projects that have been conceived of that, you know, tactical urbanism allows us an opportunity to just take those existing plans and take projects and put them into the public realm to try them out rather than start from scratch and start all over. When you think about projects, we like to think about not just projects as a standalone effort. You're really writing a story, right? You're creating the opportunity for lots of people to contribute to that story. And even though it might take longer than you hope or expect, the story that starts with these projects, and it's amazing what unfolds as you bring people together into public space to create positive change. The pilot is the study. You know, so many times it's, you know, proposed changes are in plans, and there's this next study, and then the next study, and then the next study to see if it might work. The pilot projects, the tactical urbanism projects, are the study. The actual physical thing is what you can actually measure and evaluate rather than simulating on a computer screen. It's really important that I hope you take that away today. Number 4, anyone can be an urban tactician. You can see on the right here, these are high school students that we worked with in Honolulu in the state of Hawaii. They had some very dangerous streets outside of their school, so we worked with them to design you know, some curb extensions to shorten the crossing distance and make pedestrians more visible. You can see there what some of the students came up with as a design in the middle image, and then months later, the bottom image is what was implemented, almost a one-to-one, you know, translation of what the students had envisioned to make their streets safer. So you don't have to be an expert. And finally, you can't scale what you don't permit. It's really important that if you have a successful demonstration project or a pilot project, that it's not just a one-off, that you can find a way to replicate that success and scale that success across a city so that city building incorporates this methodology holistically. So just a quick example from what we mean by the pilot is a study. This is Asheville, North Carolina. This is an existing street which is going to be rebuilt in a couple of years. So the city and a lot of advocates wanted to test out some ideas as the way to study what should be in those final reconstruction plans. So street plans with many partners in Asheville, including an organization called Asheville on Bikes, engaged a lot of people into what the street design should be and came up with a project that was to last 1 year. And it was about a half mile in length. We were able to engage 120 volunteers in delivering this transformation over 1 weekend. And there you can see at the heart of the project was a street that allowed driving and parking most of the time, but was already a block that was being closed to traffic that could be made to be a more plaza or public space when cars weren't driving on it. So that was the whole design intent there, was to make a very flexible street and a beautiful street. And of course, like anything, we measure what works and what doesn't. And primarily what we learned from this project is that the safety on the street improved dramatically by reducing the speed of traveling vehicles. What was amazing is that there were cars on the street that were traveling as high as, you know, more than 80 miles an hour. So it's extremely fast on an urban, you know, street. And those speed reductions went down pretty dramatically. In fact, after the project was installed, the highest speed recorded was 41 miles per hour, when we had an average speed reduction of about 28%. And so there were, 2 out of 3 people driving were speeding. That went down to 1 out of 5 after the project was installed. We also were able to evaluate the score in terms of the quality of the public realm. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but you can see the score, place index score went up pretty dramatically, and the anticipated economic return on the project was $3.5 million, which is pretty huge when you consider the material cost was $14,000 or $15,000 worth of materials. But in the end, seeing people use the street and use it successfully and happy getting kids in the street is really, at the end of the day, all the data that we need. So that's tactical urbanism. I should say too that this project was in the ground for 1 year, right? And now is being left to fade away. And the city is now bringing on a consultant who will learn from this project to design the long-term reconstruction of this street. So now pivoting to COVID-19. Now, this is certainly an unforeseen trend that has emerged in recent weeks. And we're seeing a wide range of responses in cities around the globe, but I think we can boil down those responses to 2 things. One is cities are either being restrictive in the use of public space, or they're being permissive by creating more space for people to spread out in densely packed cities. So on the left, you can see Chicago took this approach in closing down one of their primary public spaces along the lakefront, which is a very popular trail for walking and cycling and other activity in the park system. Whereas on the right, you see an example, Calgary has opened up, several miles of streets and closed down lanes of traffic, much like Bogota has, which we will learn about more momentarily. So those are kind of the 2 approaches that are out there. I won't steal Laura's thunder here, but we do study Bogota a lot from North America, and other cities as well have taken their ciclovia, or what we call streets routes, and found that those are the ones that are primarily ready to be transformed into these temporary mobility infrastructure and spaces for people to stay a safe distance while still being able to move around the city, particularly important for essential workers, healthcare workers, et cetera. A very similar approach has been many cities, particularly in North America, have looked to their park system and found that they could close down roads that go through their parks and open those up for people to recreate and to create more space for folks. So you can see a number of cities have gone in that direction. In some cases, like Portland, Oregon, creating many miles of spaces that are now available for walking, for recreation, et cetera. Also in Portland, we've seen citizens take matters into their own hands, a very tactical approach at the block scale. This is from Sam Balto. He's a physical education teacher, and he's been closing down his block in his neighborhood and encouraging others to do the same by sharing an open source, sign making kit for communities to do this, and then holding outdoor gym classes at the same time of day, each day, so that kids and families can get out and recreate at a safe distance from each other. Down to cycling, the cycling scale, we've seen a few cities respond with creating temporary bike infrastructure. Berlin, which is pictured here, you can see they took an existing bike lane and they doubled the width of that bike lane so that more people could use it, and then also cycle at a safe distance, ideally from each other. So not everyone's on top of each other. So this is repurposing vehicle space for more cycling. New York City has done the same in 2 locations. I was here the other day. This is downtown Brooklyn, and this is a part of a segment of a downtown link that was missing in the bike network that they have since closed that link and made the connection, which, this is from downtown Brooklyn to both the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges. So very important connections from a cycling perspective, particularly if you are working in Manhattan or Brooklyn and live on the other side of the bridge. So this is a very temporary measure that the city of New York has put into place. But I wanted to make the really important point that this is done by the Department of Transportation. This is a very similar project done mostly by volunteers. This is a project that we helped to coordinate in Jersey City, so just across the Hudson River in New York City. So this does not have to be led by engineers and department officials alone, that those resources are very strained right now in cities. And so thinking about how collaborations between nonprofit organizations and citizen groups can move forward is a really important opportunity. I'm almost out of time here, guys, so I'm going to move relatively quickly, but you've got, beg buttons, so to speak, are being turned off so that pedestrians don't have to press buttons with their hands to help, slow the spread of COVID-19, which is a really interesting response that kind of was sparked out of cities like Sydney, Auckland, Adelaide, and now spreading across cities in the United States. So we're seeing policy shifts as well, everything from free bikes and scooter access for essential workers in a number of cities. We see, like in New York, the crackdown on illegal e-throttle bikes, which is interesting. It's been a hot button political issue for several years, and now all of a sudden, people with those bikes are allowed to use them. And even down to like markets and seeing hours and curbside pickup policies evolve as cities need to think about people's access to food and how they get food safely. So if we're going to move forward with open streets, here's a quick protocol. Think about in your city, if you haven't done this yet, how can you map and create criteria of the types of streets that are appropriate for these kinds of changes? That's step one. Two, leverage your partners, whether they're block or condo associations, neighborhood associations, business improvement districts, nonprofits, any sort of community group that might have the human resources to help establish these programs or promote them as cities are thinking about how to manage their public space and public realm at this time. I think trust is a really critical factor in that. There's obviously a lot of infrastructure that's not being used for large events, so there should be cones and barricades and signs available for use in many cities around the globe. And then finally, monitor and allocate the projects. Some may go well, some may not get used at all, some may get overused. And so being able to monitor those and be able to only have police resources which are strained in the places that need it is probably the best allocation of a limited and finite resource at the moment. If you want to stay informed on some of these trends, we will share the link to this presentation, and you can see the links there to both a Google spreadsheet, which we're keeping, as well as a photo pool, which you can contribute to show what's happening in your city. So I will end with this. Cities are being hit hardest at the moment, but this is likely to spread to more rural and suburban areas. And at the same time, what we are thinking or positing is that cities will be the fastest to recover, or at least some cities might be the fastest to recover, which we're worried when this happens, it could exacerbate inequality in our political divides, particularly in North America, create those divides and expand them further. Two, there's some people who are really concerned about city living and density, but we know that moving forward, pandemics or not, cities have to thrive for us to meet all these other goals around the economy and housing and climate. Some cities are obviously establishing new policies and protocols, but many probably won't, and that's something to think about. Is there a way in your city to think about the next time something like this might happen and being more resilient in the face of something like a pandemic, and how to manage particularly the public realm in this instance? A lot of cities were caught flat-footed. And then finally, I think that cities and the actions we take now in the next several months could have ramifications for the next several decades. So cities need to be very thoughtful and think about how they can leverage this moment for long-term gain. So if you want more resources, tacticalurbanismguide.com. We've got lots of guides, materials, design, books, guides to transit, asphalt art, anything you need, you can visit that site and get resources. So I will hand it over to Laura, and we'll answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. And this has been very useful. We already have a few questions that we'll take at the end, but I think it's very interesting to see how this temporary nature of something that can start becoming more permanent is a fundamental point of how to move forward in producing better cities, and that maybe we can use this difficult moment to start thinking more about how we can convert our cities more fundamentally, let's say. I'm going to start giving Laura the floor as well, and then she's going to be, I think I have to help her a little bit in clicking through what is necessary for her to start speaking. And in the meantime, I think I didn't mention. But yeah, Laura, you can go ahead and start. I'm going to unmute you so that you can begin. Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Carlos. Hello, everyone. I am Laura Bamon. I'm working, like Carlos said, as a bicycle manager in Bogota since February. And this situation is a big challenge. But I think we can show our experience and show that we have a very large team behind all the cycling movement in Bogota. So we implemented temporary bike lanes as a measure to mitigate infection risk from COVID-19. I make a very quick overview. In Bogota, like Mike said, we have the Ciclovia. We implemented since 40 years ago, and it is experienced mostly for sport and recreation. But since 5 years ago, 5 years ago, we start to implement Ciclovia also in the cart-free day. So the people have extra offer of infrastructure, separate infrastructure, temporary. Um, we have almost 900,000 trips on bike per day and 5.6 million trips on public transport. And if the question is if the people have enough bikes to use it, the answer is that we have 1.5 million bikes, and mostly of them are in the medium and low income households. So what we expect with this measure is that these people that live day by day, that they have to work today to eat tomorrow, because this is the situation of a very big part of the population in Bogota go out still with this situation and use another transport vehicle. A vehicle that's individual, is affordable, is comfortable, and helps to reduce crowd and public transportation. What we done was, first of all, interinstitutional coordination. We have a sport and recreation office that is in charge of Ciclovia. I work in the mobility office with all the transport decisions and analyzing all what we done. Transmilenio is our BRT transport system, and we go together also with police department and IDIGER. IDIGER is a institution that is in charge of risk and emergency management. We implemented the temporary bike lanes in 4 phases. Now we have 35 kilometers during this lockdown. And we plan these corridors as a mirror of the public transport, especially the most crowded roads. We adapt and reset traffic lights to prioritize cycling. And use a lot of signaling regulation. We try to have a balance between how much people we can expose, so say, and but also the elements. So first, in the first day, we put traffic cones just 3 hours and then remove it. But now we have it 24/7 since last week. I think what is very positive of what we done is that we support this measure in the experience here, in the capability of these institutions. The people also assimilate very good this measure because it's not something usual for cyclists, because we have a very strong cycle culture, and we had also a quick response of the organizations, because we sit together virtually every day, the first week twice a day, now once in a day, to decide how we continue, how we can uh, uh, go through these days, and you through these changing um, conditions of transport. Um, uh, this is Bogota. Like I said, we have a very large network of permanent bike lanes, 550 kilometers, the green lines, and one Sunday we work a lot to plan a network for Monday, March 16. These corridors try to move the people from the west part of the city to the east part. The west part of the city is the more dense, uh, and um, and we start with that. Then we implemented the whole ciclovia of car-free day, adding these corridors. Through the experience, we saw that we had a very negative impact in public transport in one of these corridors. The speed of the public transport decreased from 17 kilometers per hour to 5 kilometers per hour. So we decide remove all the signals and some connections that depend on this section. So since March 17, we had just 76 kilometers all over the city. And then we start with a drill, with a lockdown drill between March 20 and March 24. In this moment, what we done was monitoring how the cyclists move, and we identified that the people still move from the west part of the city to the center. And so we try to complement the existing infrastructure with temporary uh, sections or corridors. In the South Park, for example, in Autopista Sur, this part connect with another town. It calls Soacha, where the people live, but the most of the people in this town work in Bogota, and we had big crowds in Transmilenio and public transport in this sector. So this is an alternative for these people. In Calle 13 also, in this part we don't have infrastructure, so we try to connect with other corridors of ciclorutas, of cycling infrastructure, and also the north part of the city, Suba, because this part is very dense. Here lived almost 1 million people just in this part, so they have to move. A lot of them are health workers or work in food supply, or are private cars, or cleaning staff, so they have to go out still before the in the quarantine. And to make the bike use more direct and coherent, we implemented some elements in the bridges, so the people doesn't have to take the bike with the hand and go the pedestrian bridges. so they can go direct with the cars. And this whole corridor is very important in the long term. So we maintain it. And as we see, this is statistics of the first week. A typical day is the blue bar, and in some places the bike use increase in this period. For example, in Americas, that is a connector of the center part of the city. Avenida Boyacá. This is also a very important connection between north and south. So this is the north part, and this is the south part, and Calle 80 that already had a permanent infrastructure, but the quality is not that good. So when we take a dedicated lane for cyclists, then the people use it very constant. This is the statistic of the next week, also last week, between 25 and 27, March 2025 and March 27. A typical day is this green bar. And as we see, because of the other measures to make social distance, a lot of people stay at home, but still they move with the bike, and especially in the south part of the city, Autosur and Americas connecting the center, it increase or maintain. So we have almost 200,000 trips per day in this moment. That's the behavior of public transport, massive transport, Transmilenio. Between March 2 and March 14, we have a normal behavior, and slowly it decreases day by day. So before the lockdown drill, we decreased the use of Transmilenio in 43%. Then in the drill we had a reduction of 80%, and now we have almost 70%. So still 109,000 trips is the maximum, but we take some measures to avoid the contact between people. In this graphic, we see also the behavior of another transport, public transport in buses, the Zonal, and the blue line is a normal day. The green line is the last day of the drill, and the red line and yellow line are last week. So the demand stabilize, and we can also measure the offer of public transport. As we see, for example, this is Americas. This is the corridor that connect the South Park with the center of the city, and we dedicated one lane. Some signals help us with the interaction with buses, and that's our cycle routes. In our team, we work not just with the people of Ciclovia that are like army, the guardians. We also work with the guidance of another bike programs like Al Colegio en Bici, so bike to school. because the schools were closed. So they help us to control uh, the transport of cyclists. Now we are facing some challenge like thief of traffic signals, because that happened in Bogota still. Invasion of bicycle lanes, mostly motorcycles and sometimes taxis, and excess speed excess, because normally the media the speed is in Bogota is 26 kilometer per hour, and now we have 43 kilometers per hour, because some streets are mostly empty. So we try uh, to sensibilize the people that they should taking care and slow and ride slow. And we also make a perception survey. uh, I have to say that the most of the people that answer this perception survey already use the bike, almost more than a half. Um, so that's how they move normally. And as we see, motorcycle, Transmilenio, or a private car use decrease. Some of them said, I don't go out, I stay at home. But bike use increase in 6%. And mostly of the people said that was a very good measure. Some of them said that's bad. So we still continue measuring and taking decisions, and trying to understand how we can make the some of these corridors permanent, to for the new demand of transport before this situation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. That was very interesting. And it's great to see that you are already providing us with a lot of information about the specifics of the impact of what was happening in Bogota, which many of us have been very eager to see. So I think that's very interesting. We have actually 14 questions. I've been organizing them a little bit to see where they're coming from, where they're going, what people are interested in, and I think there's a very good variety of them. It's actually 15 questions now. I'm going to start by reading some of them. Many are addressed both to Laura and to Mike. Mike, did you have a chance to see the questions that were posted here in case you want to take one up already now?
I have not been able to see them. They're not showing up on my.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not a
No.
problem, but basically there's questions around the how do you measure economic benefit of these initiatives? How could you measure greenhouse gas emissions if you've done so? That is sort of one big category. Another big category is related to the role of different stakeholders and how you can involve them. Is the government involved or not? So maybe you can take those two, and then I can start also organizing a little bit more than the ones that have come.
Okay, so economical benefits we don't measure it, because we actually we're trying to find out how we can be in contact with the people without being in contact, especially these people that use the bike, because mostly of them they don't use Twitter or another social media uh, uh, elements. So maybe with the data that we already have and the mobility survive. What was the other question?
So there were questions about the role of the different stakeholders, government and others, and also, yeah, measurements in general.
Okay, this initiative was 100% institutional. Um, it was an idea. Actually, we saw the idea from New York Saturday, and we say why we don't do that, and we start articulating the whole work with this sport institution, this sport office, and we try to solve everything with our institutional resources. Uh, with the contracts that we already had, with the elements that we already have. We have to buy some elements, some barricades because of the theft. But actually, we don't want to promote that the community go out and use it. Uh, it is just for these people that have to go out, because if they don't work, then the city doesn't function.
Okay, there's a large set of questions which are more related specifically to the pandemic and the measurements that are being taken about this. I mean, as many of you know, depending on the city and the country, there's a different level of restrictions. Whereas some countries like Mexico have very little or no restrictions, there's others like, for example, Bogota, which has a very, very stringent social distancing in which you can only go out to walk your dog or for very, very specific purposes that are directly related to the pandemic or to the emergency and taking care of the emergency. So people are asking more or less around whether the measurements that are being taken, both the measures and the measurements of the impact that are being taken, can somehow be used for mitigation and preparation for the moment when we can all go back outside. And sort of, if any of you, maybe Mike, if you have some thoughts around that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the variety, as you mentioned, is pretty wide on how these measures have been put into place, and obviously the policies around how people can utilize them and when they utilize them. You know, New York is interesting because we might have seen we saw this huge surge in cycling very quickly, and that was very evident. And then that surge, I think, has been reduced as the policies have become more and more strict in the city. That being said, you know, I don't know how much the city, the Department of Transportation, is thinking about the space, which is actually quite small, that they reclaimed. I have a feeling that the changes that have been put into place in downtown Brooklyn and also the other location is 2nd Avenue in Manhattan, I feel pretty confident that those will be made permanent after this pandemic subsides, because they already announced they were going to close this gap on 2nd Avenue where the bike lane ends for a period of about 10 blocks. That will be closed, and that's where there's a temporary measure right now. So that's going to happen. In downtown Brooklyn, there's been a large and long cry for these small gaps to be filled in the bikeway network as well. And I would think that this is an opportunity to just take that space. But overall, what I'm understanding and seeing from cities is that they may not be thinking tactically about their measures in terms of trying to institutionalize the long-term change. If they are thinking that way, they're certainly not communicating that publicly, which is probably in some ways could be a smart political strategy at the moment. But this is a moment in time where cities can really take a breath and think about, okay, we have this emergency, we have limited resources, we have to respond the best way that we can at the moment. But if you're not also thinking about what comes next, then you're not being strategic to connect the tactic of the temporary measures for the longer term. And so that's where I really want to see cities get smart about this and be able to even expand in some ways this space and how it can be utilized if they're not on total lockdown. That's obviously a very different type of situation in terms of use. So it will be interesting to see, and it will probably be varied depending on city to city and place to place.
And then Laura, maybe you can talk around any plans that Bogota has in terms of informing yourselves about what is happening now so that it can help you in future, either in the specific topic of cycle planning or something broader in the sense of the mobility strategy that you have in the city.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Actually, our plan in these 40 years is increase in the number of kilometers, but not also new ones. We want to optimize some corridors and some old infrastructure that doesn't function very well because of the number of cyclists. And some corridors that are very controversial. For example, in the east part of the city, Carrera Séptima, the last mayor want to build another Transmilenio in this corridor, and in this administration, we don't want it. We want to make a cycle route, and we work before this situation. We work in planning how we can do it, and how we can make a permanent infrastructure and combine it with buses and with more and better pedestrians infrastructure. And now we see this like as an opportunity, uh, because the people doesn't want doesn't know how to uh, what to do. So normally in a project and a cycle, when we start with the yes, the bike lanes in the street, when we took part of the streets for cyclists, we had a lot of controversy and with the community. But now the community is inside their homes. They are scared about going outside and public transport, and so they doesn't know if they have to protest because of these lanes. So it's a social situation that maybe is something positive, to implement something new without so much resistance, but it is also a message, not just because of the virus, because we have already very poor air quality, and this kind of measures is also very positive to change the behavior of the people, and decrease the motorized vehicles use. So I think we have a lot of arguments, not just technical arguments, to promote bike use in the long term and the medium term, and rethink the city, and also see how the people get in the city, because sometimes we design for short trips, 7 kilometers, but we see that the people from other towns came to Bogota and cycled 15 or 20 kilometers.
That's really interesting, and we have many questions. So what I'm going to suggest is that with the help of Tumi, that we're going to compile these and see how we can get a little bit more of insights in the coming days, if possible. I think there's 3 big lessons from what we've been talking with both Mike and Laura. And one is around how this emergency and this pandemic has helped us understand how to engage with this idea of social, or rather physical distancing, and how active transport, or what is normally called non-motorized transport, has a very important role in achieving this. And then what do we do with public transport, and how can we think about other modes of transport? The second thing that I think is in many people's minds is around what should be done after this moment. How should we get the best out of what is happening now, and the temporary nature of some of the measures? Should we make them permanent? And the third, which is linked to that, is around the temporary nature of tactical urbanism and the opportunity to transform many of these things into something permanent. I mean, in that, I always give an example around the Eiffel Tower, the London Eye, and many taxes in our countries, which have been established or built as something temporary, but they have remained for hundreds of years, or more than 100 years, as something that is permanent. So it does seem that some temporary things are a door to achieving something permanent. And there were many other questions around very specific things, how to do with pedestrians, cyclists, what other modes are there, how do you engage with telework? And their colleagues from Tumi were even expecting us to have enough time to do a quiz. So I'm going to send you a link through the chat, which is this quiz that you can do as we finalize. And then what you can do is that you can click on that link and send a screenshot of the results to the email that I'm going to send now. And right after this, I'm going to send you a few links that were shared by Mike when he was doing his presentation. And I'm going to go to the link to see if I can open it and play with everybody with this Kahoot in the few minutes that we have left. So people have been, so I will call myself Mega Man. Okay, so it's starting. Hope everybody's ready to answer. Who can do tactical urbanism? Oh, this is fun. I hope everybody has their screen. And then Fab seems to have one. Okay, I'm going first. I just noticed that I'm the one sharing my screen to see if I'm getting everything right, and then let's hope that I did pay attention to everything, and then we'll be done in 1 more minute. Oh, in my opinion. Okay, so this was nice. The people from Tumi are very creative every time in doing all these things. I think it was very much worthwhile to have everybody here. I'm going to take a moment before you leave to just paste some of the links that are around in the presentations and in what Mike and what Laura were sharing, so that everybody can also see them, and then you can just click directly onto some of these when you have the chance. And I'm going to also paste what you see in the screen so that you can just click and find many of these easily. Thank you very much. I saw that we had more than 200 people in this webinar, and I felt it was great and that we learned a lot. It was very nice of you, both Mike and Laura, to take time of your busy schedules to help us in helping us learn about how to do tactical urbanism and how it has been done and is being done around the COVID-19, which is definitely something which is an emergency, but we anyway can learn many things around this. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you can continue participating in TUMI's wonderful webinars. Bye.